Welcome to Nightmares Incorporated, where our goal is to make your sleep anything but restful. So sit back, relax, and enjoy part 3 of Beyond the Veil. "2:52 a.m. During the trip over to the Old Mill Road, David and his deputies began to see signs that the infection that had taken hold in some of the citizens of Haven had begun to spread to the town itself. The cruiser's headlights swept across Main Street, illuminating scenes that defied reason even in the fractured hours before dawn. The road itself writhed beneath the tires, slick black tar swelling and pulsing as if some vast thing beneath the surface was flexing its limbs. Tendrils, thick as tree limbs and glistening with viscous dew, curled out from storm drains and between cracks in the pavement, snaking lazily across the street before retracting at the touch of light. Froman's grip tightened on the steering wheel as the cruiser lurched over a rising seam in the asphalts. "Are you seeing this?" he asked, his voice a notch above a whisper. Hernandez, squinting into the shifting gloom, nodded. "It's like the town's alive, or being overwritten." On either side, houses twisted against the sky, porches stretching and sagging, shingles fluttering like scales along the backs of hunched, unnatural silhouettes. Streetlights bent over the roadway, their poles elongated and drooping, casting sickly, swaying shadows that never seemed to touch the ground. Storefronts on the square folded inward, their glass fronts rippling as if some unseen tide pressed against the walls from within. A shrill static burst from the radio, then fizzled into strained silence. In the rear view, Deputy Ross's car kept its distance, the beams of his headlights wavering as if refracted through water. An alleyway yawned open, wrong-angled and impossibly deep, lined by the tentacular shapes that now infested Haven's underbelly. Froman kept his eyes on the undulating road ahead, knuckles pale against the wheel. "A book did this?" Hernandez inquired, half in disbelief, half in accusation. "How the hell does ink and paper rewrite a town?" Hernandez's gaze lingered on a porch that had sprouted new angles while they watched, the boards twisting in a pattern that seemed to echo the swirl of words in an unseen page. "I don't think it's the book that did this. I think that book's just a facilitator," Froman said. "Maybe it's more than just ink and paper. Maybe it's like..." He paused, searching for language that fit the moment. "A blueprint for reality." Hernandez glanced at him, eyes perplexed. "So someone reads some words and this all starts? The streets change, the houses fold up, those people turn into God knows what?" "The way I've been thinking about it's like this," Froman began. "What's 3 plus 4? He asked the deputy. 7, Hernandez answered promptly. "Now, if I replace that plus sign with a minus sign, what do you get?" he asked next. "-1, Hernandez responded. And then, "Dave, what's your point?" "My point is, by just changing one thing in that equation, you end up with completely different results. Maybe whatever Michael's friend did is kind of like that. He read something in that book that changed something fundamental about our reality, and that change let something slip through. Michael said he thought it was like a door being propped open. Something is on the other side trying to enter our world. Maybe the things we've seen so far are what little bit of it was able to make the trip." A storefront shuddered as they passed, the window panes sliding over one another like stacked glass cards. "You're thinking of that thing we saw on the horizon?" Hernandez asked. "You think that's what's trying to get in?" I don't know, David said thoughtfully. Maybe. I don't think it was a hallucination because we both saw it, but I don't think it was really there at the same time. If something like that was here, I don't think we'd be having this conversation. Static hissed again on the radio, a stuttering pulse that almost formed words. Froman slowed as the cruiser neared the town square. So if we find the book, we shut this down? Hernandez asked. Sheriff Froman nodded, though there was no certainty in the gesture. The shapes in the alley seemed to pulse with dark anticipation, as if the town itself were listening. Michael thinks he can reverse whatever Andrew did. I think that's a long shot, but seeing as I don't have any other ideas about how to deal with this situation, I figure it's worth a try. Otherwise, I think we might be looking at the first chapter as something none of us can finish. Hernandez exhaled, fogging the windshield. Let's just hope he can do something with the damn thing. They pushed forward, headlights slicing through the restless dark, searching for the object that had become the axis of Haven's unraveling world. The cruiser's headlights faltered as they turned onto Old Mill Road, the gravel beneath the tires grinding like teeth. The town's distortion seemed to fade at the edge of the woods, replaced by a deeper and more deliberate darkness. The trees crowded close, their trunks warped and slick with something that shimmered in the beam of the headlights, neither bark nor lichen, but a pattern, as if an alien language had grown roots here too. Froman killed the engine. Silence crashed down, broken only by the distant, deliberate snap of a branch. No one spoke as they stepped out of their vehicles. Boots sank into deep loam, and the night was heavy with the breath of unseen things. Hernandez scanned the tree line, her flashlight trembling in her grip, almost in anticipation, as if the forest itself might inhale and speak their names. Somewhere ahead, the wind blew through the trees, creating a slow, creaking sigh, followed by the unmistakable thud of something massive shifting among the trunks. Branches rattled in a rhythm that mimicked heartbeats, slow and expectant. Froman felt each step drag at him, as if the ground wanted to hold him back. Collins fell in behind them, the crunch of twigs underfoot too quick, too loud. "It's just the wind," they whispered. But even the lie tasted hollow. Every shadow seemed to watch, every leaf to shudder with willful intent. The path narrowed, the dark on either side pulsing with the half-glimpsed movement of things too large to belong in any ordinary forest. Shapes that lumbered without grace, waiting. Somewhere ahead a lantern bobbed, no, swayed, caught in the crook of a low branch, casting sickly gold across the undergrowth. The trees here leaned together, their branches tangled in a lattice that closed behind them, erasing any hope of turning back. Froman tightened his grip on the flashlight and drew his sidearm, jaw set. "Let's go," he breathed, voice barely rising above the night's uneasy chorus. "We stick to the plan. We find that book." But Haven's woods had their own stories now, and as the party pressed forward, the sound of unseen things following grew louder. Slow, deliberate, inexorable. The forest was listening, and the next page was waiting to be written. 3:15 a.m. Michael sat hunched on the unforgiving bench of the sheriff's department lobby, an old lantern humming on the table next to him, casting everything in a shade too pale to be comforting. His fingers worked restlessly at the bottom of his shirt, and he tried fruitlessly to banish the unwelcome vision that had joined him. But Andrew was there, again, not in the flesh, but conjured fresh from memory or madness, perched with insolent grace on the opposite chair. Shadows bunched beneath Andrew's eyes, and his smile flashed too wide, too knowing. "So this is how you wait it out?" the vision mused, voice silk smooth and tinged with mockery. "You really think the sheriff will be back? That any of them will? They're not the only ones hanging out in those woods, you know." Michael's jaw clenched. He looked away, but Andrew's gaze pressed against his thoughts, insistent as a storm building beneath his skull. "What if they do come back?" Andrew continued, legs crossed, spectral and serene. "What if they actually find the book and bring it to you, their loyal advisor, the man with all the answers? Will you finish it, Michael? Will you complete the ritual? Or are you still pretending you can stop this? Pretending that you're not already in too deep?" Michael swallowed, pulse quickening. The hum of the police scanner on the counter stuttered, and for a moment he thought he saw the lights flicker, the world drawing breath in anticipation. Andrew leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes glinting with feverish amusement. "You know how this ends, even if you're too much of a coward to admit it. They're all gonna die, eventually, and so will you if you don't play ball. Which one will you choose when the pages are handed to you? Life or death? Reward or punishment?" Outside, the dawn was still more of an idea than a promise, and Michael was left with nothing but the folding silence of the waiting room and the constant sound of Andrew's taunting voice, threading through his thoughts like a refrain he could not unhear. Michael said nothing. His silence was a brittle shield, brittle as frost, and Andrew's shape, flickering, impossibly vivid, leaned closer, the air around him shimmering with accusation. "You let me die, you traitorous fuck," Andrew whispered, voice sharp as the edge of memory. "You pushed me out of my circle of protection. You stood there and watched, and you did nothing. Tell yourself it was the right thing to do, that you had no choice, whatever makes the story easier to swallow." He smiled, teeth a slash of white in the manufactured gloom. "But that's what you do, isn't it? You hide. You cower. And what did you accomplish by killing me? Not a goddamn thing, that's what. What's happening now is far worse than what would have resulted if you'd have let me finish. But you didn't. You killed me. You goddamn fucking murderer, you killed me." Michael's fists curled tighter, knuckles shining. Still, he would not look at Andrew, would not meet those haunted, hollow eyes. Andrew's tone softened, almost sympathetic. "You think you can do anything if you get that book? There are things out there, Michael. Hungry things. Patient things. They know your name now. They know the taste of your fear." A slow, deliberate pause. Michael could feel the world narrowing, a pressure building in the air as if the walls yearned to entomb around him. The scrape of a chair startled Michael, fracturing the suffocating pressure that pressed in from all sides. Holly the dispatcher approached, her soft footfalls a gentle counterpoint to the electric hush. She balanced a tepid cup of coffee in one hand, her badge glinting beneath the flicker of the lantern light. She paused at the edge of the waiting room, surveying Michael with practiced concern, the look of someone who's seen too many people unravel in the dead hours before dawn. "Hey." Her voice was low, soothing, carrying the weight of a dozen similar conversations spun out across midnight shifts. She set the cup down just within Michael's reach, leaning on the counter as if to anchor herself, and him, to the moment. You think if Froman brings you that book, you'll be able to stop all this? The question was asked lightly, but her gaze searched his face for fissures, for answers. Michael's eyes darted to her, and then away, to the shadowed corners, to the battered chair where Andrew's ghost sat, legs crossed, amusement flickering across spectral features. Andrew's smirk tugged at the edges of Michael's vision, silent but insistent, a reminder of everything unresolved. Michael rubbed a trembling hand across his mouth, the taste of old coffee and fear familiar on his tongue. The word trembled, almost disappearing beneath the persistent hum of the police scanner. He drew in a shaky breath, forcing his shoulders to loosen. I honestly don't know, he admitted, the words falling heavy and unguarded. It feels like maybe, if I had the book, I could do something. Close the door, lock whatever's out there away. But every time I try to see how it ends... His gaze flickered back to Andrew, who mouthed the word liar, lips curling in soundless mockery. It just gets harder to tell what's real and what's not. Like the story's already been written and I'm just catching up. Holly followed his line of sight, her brows knitting as if she could sense the chill Andrew brought with him. She lingered, letting the silence settle before offering a half smile, a small token of reassurance. You don't have to figure it out alone, she said, her hand resting lightly on the counter. Whatever's happening out there, we can face it together, okay? And that's what we're here for. Michael lowered his head, gripping the cup of coffee in both hands, letting its slight warmth seep into his bones. But even as he forced himself to focus on Holly, the comforting cadence of her voice, the solid promise in her words, Andrew began laughing, soft and merciless, curling beneath the surface of Michael's thoughts, promising that the worst was yet to come. Finally, Michael met the dispatcher's eyes and slightly shook his head. His eyes were tired, Holly saw, bloodshot, and ringed with darkness and a weariness that a man so young should not feel. That's the thing, he said softly. I think I'm going to have to do it alone. 3:25 a.m. Denise's feet shuffled numbly over the warped wooden floors, each board groaning under her weight, as if the library resented her presence. The walls around her seemed to contract and breathe, their faded wallpaper peeling in ribbons, revealing veins of old plaster underneath. The air hung heavy and damp, thick with the earthy scent of mold and the acrid tang of dust, coating her tongue and burning her nostrils with every hesitant breath. Book spines leered from their shelves, their titles smeared by time, letters swimming and twisting in the gloom. The corridors betrayed her with every turn, doubling back in impossible ways, shelves crowding in so tightly she sometimes had to squeeze sideways, hands trembling as she braced herself against splintered oak, the wood biting into her palms. She had lost all sense of time. The old grandfather clock at the end of the main hallway had stopped at 9:12 p.m., its pendulum motionless, its tick-tock lost to the silence that swallowed the once familiar structure. Her legs ached with fatigue, and her mind teetered on the edge of panic and exhaustion, a persistent, bone-deep tremor that radiated from her knees and spread upward, making every step uncertain. Shadows clung to the ceiling and danced along the walls, chasing her footsteps, whispering with voices not her own, a cacophony of splintered memories and warnings, their words half familiar and always wrong. Every so often she caught the echo of laughter, brittle and sharp, ricocheting from alcove to alcove, mingling with the creaks and sighs of old timber.
"Lost,"
creaked a voice from nowhere, a sound that was ageless and inhuman.
"Wandering, wandering, always wandering, until something finds you."
A shape moved in the dark. Denise could not say when she first noticed it, only that a pressure began to build at her temples, as if the very air thickened and quivered around her like a living thing. The shadows pressed closer, coalescing at the edges of her vision, and then she saw it. Impossibly, it was a hand, stretching out from the gloom. Its outline was blurred, the skin mottled and faintly luminescent, as if reality itself rebelled against its form. The fingers splayed, unnaturally long, pushing at nothing, their tips flattening against an invisible wall of air that shimmered like glass in the dim light. Denise stumbled backward, her mouth opened in a silent gasp, one heel catching on a loose floorboard. The pressure built, and the hand forced its way deeper into the room, distorting the space around it, warping the strange blue light and casting a darkness so dense that the shadows appeared to reach for her, curling around her feet. The hand dissolved, its shape unraveling into something more monstrous, a contour emerging, then pressing against the invisible barrier, bending the air with its impossible presence. Denise's breath snagged in her throat as the shadows thickened and a face appeared, bulbous and featureless, draped in shifting colors that flickered and pulsed, shades Denise could not name. It was a face only in the sense that it was not anything else. There was a suggestion of eyes, too many and arranged in spirals, a mouth, glistening and cavernous, rimmed with pale, translucent flesh, not built for speech or smile, but for some other alien purpose. From deep within the library, the sound of cracked laughter, accompanied by screams both human and inhuman. The face that was no face at all yawned towards her, filling her senses with the insatiable need to feed, to feast upon flesh, to bathe itself in the blood of its victims, to rend, to tear, to feed. Meat. Meat. The smell of rotting meat and the taste of blood upon her tongue. A desire so intense, pressure building within her body. The need to kill, the need to feast, to rip and tear flesh with her teeth, to bask in the screams of her victims, to feed. As the pressure built until she felt upon the verge of exploding, the face leered ever closer. Denise screamed in protest and denial, in understanding and madness. And then, thankfully, the edges of her vision grayed. Her own screams followed her into unconsciousness. 3:37 a.m. At first, the trek through the woods went well for Sheriff Froman and his deputies. The strange new stars were bright and heavy above the trees, casting spectral shadows over the undergrowth as the group moved in single file, boots crunching through dew-slicked leaves that glistened faintly with the residue of an odd liquid. Their radios were turned off except David's for the time being, But for a while nothing stirred save the nervous rhythm of their breaths and the distant chorus of frogs echoing from a nearby stream. Every few steps, Sheriff Froman scanned the forest with a practiced eye, searching for any sign: an upturned branch, a dark stain on the bark, a footprint pressed into the soft earth. Deputy Mason, flashlight angled ahead, tried to peer through a tangle of brambles that snagged at his uniform and left scratches on his skin. The air felt cold and was thick with the scent of moss and decay. It was as if the woods were slowly rotting as they traipsed through them. Then there was a faint rustle, too deliberate to be mere wind, that set everyone on edge. Mason froze, his fingers tightening around his sidearm, while the others cautiously raised their weapons. The silence stretched out, expectant, until from the shadows above a black, glistening mass erupted downward. With a wet, hissing shriek, the spider-like creature dropped onto Mason's back. Its claws, long and hooked, sank through the fabric of his uniform and into his flesh, pinning him in place. The woods erupted in chaos. Mason's cries tore through the night air, echoing against the trunks, mingling with the shrill, inhuman screeches of the creature. The deputy fell to the ground, a black shape scrabbling upon his back. There were confused yells, cries to help him, that there wasn't a clear shot, a few desperate screams of revulsion. The shape dug at the deputy, attacking with the manic energy of an insect. In the starlit night, the creature was nearly impossible to see. Then there was a sickening wet crack as the mandibles on the malformed horror bit through the back of Mason's head. These disruptions to the quiet of the woods were closely followed by a chilling chorus, the sounds of other things that must be responding to the noise of the struggle were converging upon them. Branches snapped beneath unseen weight, dry leaves rustled in frantic waves, guttural grunts and wet slithers reverberated from every direction. The starlight seemed to shrink away, retreating from these landlocked wretches, as more shapes began to move in the gloom, delineated only by the gleam of pale eyes and the slow, relentless click of claws pressing into the earth. Sheriff Froman barked orders, voice trembling, as his deputies pivoted, weapons raised, hearts drumming in their ears. The forest itself felt as if it had awakened, hungry, and the line between hunter and hunted blurred in the suffocating dark. Flashlight beams swept through trees, revealing nothing more than vague impressions of their enemy. Mason had stopped screaming. The sound of his body being dragged away through the dead leaves seemed to be a premonition of what awaited the rest of them. David wiped sweat from his eyes, trying to gain sight of a target, of where the threat was coming from. "It's coming from everywhere, you fucking hillbilly," Brewster barked within his mind. "Now what I need you to do, soldier, is quit looking around wildly, calm your goddamn breathing, and use your fucking ears. How many hostiles are there?" I don't know," David thought frantically. "I can't tell. Shit, I don't even know how many legs these goddamn things might have." "Calm your mind, West Virginia," Brewster ordered. "This ain't the first time you've been in a fight in the woods, so calm your mind, or you and your people are gonna die." David did as he was commanded. He slowed his breathing and closed his eyes slightly, focusing all of his attention to his ears. "How many, Private?" Brewster again. "3, maybe 4 on my left," David answered. "Sounds like something big on my right. Multiple steps, but moving in unison. So we'll say 5 to 7 hostiles." Brewster spoke calmly. And considering what you already seen from these motherfuckers, I think that's more than you and your group can handle. Especially here. You gotta get moving, West Virginia. But Mason, David began, yet Brewster didn't let him finish. Mason is dead, soldier, he said sternly but not unkindly. And you know that. And I don't think he would want you and the rest of his friends to die while hesitating. I think he'd want you to finish the mission. The way forward sounds clear. And better yet, the kid said that the book was buried in a clearing, far more conducive to fighting. But even if we make it there, what do? God damn it, West Virginia, I taught you all of this. Brewster barked so loudly that David almost flinched. You circle up, shoulder to shoulder, and shoot at anything that moves until nothing's moving. Remember the one in the basement? The drill sergeant continued. You stunned it, or confused it. Hell, maybe you even scared it for a moment. In any case, it fucked off. Maybe these bastards will do the same. I don't think these motherfuckers are all that smart. Now lead your man, West Virginia, Brewster ordered, or you all die right here. Froman raised his voice to be heard over the confused chatter and ominous noises from the dark and bellowed. On me! Form up and run! Make for the clearing! Let's move! A frantic scramble ensued. Boots thudded against the loam as the deputies tore through the undergrowth, branches whipping their faces, breath hitching in sharp gasps. The thick bramble clawed at their uniforms, snatching at sleeves and belts, trying to hold them back. Behind them, the cacophony of pursuit grew louder. Crashing limbs, guttural snarls, the sickening slap and scrape of claws against bark and stone. Shadows surged between the trunks, monstrous shapes glimpsed only in flashes of starlight, or the wild swing of a flashlight beam. Sheriff Froman yelled for them to keep moving, his words ragged, desperate. Every heartbeat was a countdown, every stride a frantic gamble, the woods folding deeper and darker around them, the path twisting beneath their feet. Something slapped at David's arm, almost knocking him off balance. Then there was the roar of the shotgun that Hernandez was carrying, followed by a howl of pain and fury so alien that David believed he would hear it within his mind until his dying day. Another deputy stumbled, nearly falling as a claw grazed their boot, sending up a spray of damp leaves. The forest seemed to funnel them onward, narrowing to a claustrophobic corridor of tangled roots and spectral silver beams. The deputy's world shrank to tunnel vision, running, breathing, the slap of their pulse in their ears. Somewhere ahead, the stream called with its chorus of frogs, a promise of open space and a chance to see their attackers. But the creatures were relentless and many. And the woods themselves felt complicit, each tree and shadow conspiring to swallow them whole. Fear was a living thing, driving them on as the predator behind gave chase, ever nearer, with every breath and every step threatening to be their last. They crashed forward, desperation eclipsing exhaustion, driven by the memory of Michael's urgent directions, the clearing, the book, salvation or damnation pressed into the dirt not far ahead. The forest closed in, funneling them like prey, and the nightmare behind them grew louder, hungrier. Someone cried out, a sudden curt yelp swallowed by the rushing dark. David twisted, glimpsing Deputy Richards being yanked down by a mass of bristling limbs and hunger, their form vanishing almost instantly beneath a writhing heap of shadow and teeth. The running stuttered, faltered, but Froman's voice, hoarse but unyielding, cracked like a whip. Don't you fucking stop! Keep moving! They did, stumbling through a thicket that tore at their skin, hearts hammering, lungs burning, each stride a wager against oblivion. The bramble thinned, alien starlight teased through the branches, and the chorus of frogs ahead grew louder. The promise of water and open ground close enough to taste. Suddenly, the woods spilled open. The surviving deputies broke into the clearing, breathless and wild-eyed, staggering into the pale silver space where the earth had been freshly disturbed. Michael's mark, a ragged mound beneath the roots of a half-fallen birch. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. The creatures crashed against the tree line, held back by some primal reluctance or the shimmer of starlight on open ground. Froman fell to his knees beside the mound, frantically clawing at the dirt, his fingers numb and clumsy. Collins and Hernandez stood guard, shotguns trembling, eyes darting between the black wall of the trees and the pale promise of the book. Somewhere behind them, the forest seethed, restless. They had reached the clearing. They had reached their destination, battered and broken, but alive for now. Sheriff Froman's fingers scrabbled through the damp, disturbed earth, finally closing around the battered spine of the book. He almost recoiled once his hands made contact with it. The book felt warm, despite the cold earth it had been buried in, and it felt alive somehow. The cover, smeared with mud and streaked by his bloody grip, shone faintly with a strange silvery sheen beneath the stars. He hefted it from the grave-like hollow, staggering upright, breath ragged, the copper tang of blood mingling with the scent of churned soil. The creatures pressed into the clearing now, their forms shifting and grotesque, spined bodies hunched low, claws gouging furrows into the moss and loam, eyes burning with a sickly light. Yet for all their hunger, they hesitated at the edge, circling but unwilling to approach the spot where Froman stood. Each time one inched closer, it recoiled, as if struck by an invisible force. The book pulsed faintly in his hands, warmth radiating through the torn skin of his palms, its presence both beacon and barrier. Collins and Hernandez shifted uneasily, sweat glistening along their brows as they maintained a tight grip on their shotguns. The wind stilled, and the frog's chorus faded, replaced by the uneasy rustle of brambles and the low, rasping growls of the beasts. The clearing itself felt changed, a place set apart, starlight shimmering on the upturned roots, the disturbed mound like a wound in the earth. Froman's eyes darted from the monsters to the book, then to his battered companions. The deputies held their ground, backs to each other, forming a fragile circle of resolve to ward off the encroaching dark. And there, at the center of it all, Sheriff Froman clung to the book, knuckles white, blood running in rivulets down to the grass. Around him the night pressed close, yet held at bay for now by the whispering promise bound within the book's pages, the line no creature dared cross. "What the fuck are they doing, Sheriff?" Hernandez asked in a whisper. "I don't know," David answered, although he thought that he did. From the edge of the clearing, a shape disentangled itself from the clutch of lesser creatures, a silhouette that dwarfed the others, rising on jointed limbs, its skin mottled with black chitin and the faint shimmer of something unearthly. It moved with a deliberate, measured grace, as though gravity meant little to it, each step sinking deeper into the moss until the ground itself seemed to recoil from its presence. Froman stared, transfixed, as the thing drew near. It was a grotesque amalgam, the twisted torso and arms of a man, fused with the arching tail and armored carapace of a monstrous scorpion. Its hands ended in hooked pincers, and its eyes were too many and too bright. A long, segmented tail dripped luminous venom onto the grass. Yet it was not the body that held Froman's gaze, nor the impossible proportions, but the way the air seemed to warp around it, bending the minuscule light and swallowing sound. Something shifted in the confused, fatigued brain of Sheriff Froman. A slow, inexorable opening, as if a door had been forced ajar inside his mind. For a single, shattering moment, he saw past the mask of flesh and carapace to the truth that stood before him. Something so alien to his perceptions that language failed. It was not a beast or a man, not even a nightmare from some lost folklore. It was a presence, a hunger beneath the surface of reality, clothed in borrowed bones and borrowed dreams. Froman's grip on the book tightened, his breathing slowed, and the clearing seemed to tilt nauseatingly. He felt the thing's gaze settle upon him, not through its eyes, but through some deeper sense, a pressure, an awareness, a silent question. The world trembled, colors bled at the edges, and for an instant, Froman knew the depth of what lurked in the spaces between the world he knew and what lay beyond. Quietly, a voice spoke within his mind.
Yes, see me. You may join the boy at my altar if you wish. Finish the ritual. Bring me forth. Live as my subject, or die screaming as my meal.
The vision passed, leaving him gasping, the taste of cold metal thick on his tongue. But the memory of it lingered, a warning, a promise, a secret written in the marrow of his bones. The creature moved no closer, held at bay by the book's malign radiance. David took a tentative step forward. The creatures that had encircled them took a hesitant step back. David turned to his 6 remaining deputies. Everyone, stay close to me. We're walking out of here, David said in a far calmer voice than he would have believed he could manage. But Sheriff, what if they... Collins began. They won't, David interjected. He didn't know how he knew this. He just did. It's like they're afraid of the book, the sheriff thought to himself. Or maybe it's that they won't risk harming it. Maybe they want us to have it. Or more likely, they want Michael to have it. But what did that mean exactly? Did it mean that Michael was untrustworthy? Was there a double cross that David wasn't seeing? It's not like you got a lot of options, West Virginia, Brewster said. Unless you want to try reading that thing yourself. But if it fucks you up the way the kid said it fucked him up, I'd venture there won't be much left of Haven by the time you get your shit together. This reasoning was solid, David surmised, and when it came down to it, he wanted to trust Michael. In the end, that might be a mistake, but David reasoned that if it turned out to be a bad idea, he likely wouldn't live long enough to regret it. Sheriff Froman's grip around the ancient book tightened, resisting the urge to drop it as it grew warmer and seemed to writhe against his battered hands. He gave the signal to move. The deputies clustered around him, forming a protective wedge, their uniforms scraped and muddied from the night's chaos. Flashlights flickered in trembling hands, beams slicing nervous arcs through the thick undergrowth. Their breaths came in shallow clouds, mingling with the damp, earthy scent that clung to the forest floor. Behind and all around, the shadowy creatures maintained a careful distance, an uneven ring of twisted forms with too many limbs and glimmering pupilless eyes. Their presence was palpable, humming in the air like static before a storm. The weight of unseen stares contested each step forward, and the deputies' nerves were drawn tight as piano wire. As the group pressed deeper into the woods, every footfall sounded thunderous in the hush, and the forest held its breath again. Twigs snapped, brittle and sharp, while unseen things rustled in the brambles. McDaniel's usual bravado had dissolved, his jaw clenched so tight it trembled. Collins muttered a prayer under his breath, voice thin with dread, while Hernandez kept glancing back, eyes wide and wild. The journey felt endless, time measured in cold sweat and the aching burn of muscles locked in tension. An owl called once, mournful and distant, and somewhere far off a branch cracked loudly enough to make the whole group flinch. Eventually, the oppressive darkness began to lift. The tangled woods receded, and the landscape opened into the slight clearing where they had abandoned their vehicles, starlight washing over dew-soaked grass. Their cruiser stood waiting just beyond a scrub of alder, a sight so familiar and solid it nearly brought tears of relief. The deputies quickened their pace, boots squelching in the wet earth, the tension ebbing just slightly as the patrol car's reflective decals shone like beacons of normalcy. On the edge of the trees, the creatures lingered, their forms half hidden in shadow, eyes catching the faint light with an unearthly glint. They watched in utter silence, neither advancing nor retreating, as if bound by rules that the humans could not hope to understand. The moment hung, fragile and electric, until David, heart-pounding, led his people to the safety of the cruisers, the strange book heavy in his hands, and the mystery of Michael's role hanging between them like mist in the night. On the way back to the department, Sheriff Froman noticed even more changes that had taken hold within Haven. Strange, fleshy mounds grew out of the streets. Some of the buildings they drove by were covered by things that looked like black vines and gave the impression that they were slithering over the structures, looking for access to the inside. Within the sky, there was what appeared to be a blasted and dead star, which loomed as large as the moon normally would. He wondered how the people of Haven were faring. He hoped that they were hiding in their basements. He hoped that fire and rescue and the deputies he had sent out to go door to door had warned people of the danger, and that those men and women had found safety themselves in the ever-changing landscape. Above all, he ruminated on how powerless he felt in the present situation. This must be how a field mouse feels when he sees the plow coming, David thought bitterly. He can see his destruction moving towards him, but he can't do a goddamn thing about it. By the time they finally arrived back at the sheriff's department, it was 4:35 a.m. David cast his eye to the horizon as he pulled his cruiser into its parking spot, and he was wholly unsurprised that he did not see the soft light of morning. 4:45 a.m. Now back within the relative safety and familiarity of the station, Sheriff Froman took stock of his deputies. They were all huddled together within the dispatch office and the lobby, looking as hollow-eyed as he imagined the survivors of a nuclear war might look. He wished that he could let them rest, give them a chance to gather their bearings, but he knew that the night's work was not yet done. "Gear up," he said, his voice low but resolute, each word cutting through the tense silence. "Resupply on ammunition and stay sharp. No one moves out until I give the word." The group dispersed, boots echoing in the hallway, their steps heavy with fatigue and the grim anticipation of what awaited outside. The lantern lights continued to sputter, casting jittery patterns on the cracked linoleum. Froman caught Michael's eye and beckoned him with a tilt of his head. The two retreated into the sheriff's cramped office, cluttered with faded maps and half-spent radio batteries. David's hand trembled slightly as he handed over possession of the book to Michael, the book that was responsible for this seemingly never-ending nightmare. Its odd leather cover was warped and mottled by years of damp, the pages marked with cryptic glyphs and stains that resembled dried blood. As it left his hand, David was both relieved to be free of its weight and filled with the desire to take it back out of some strange self-destructive impulse. The air seemed to grow colder as he pressed it into Michael's hands, the significance of the moment settling between them like a thunderclap. "I lost 2 good men retrieving this for you," Froman whispered, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness and the unmistakable edge of dread. "Don't let him die in vain." "A part of me didn't even want to hand this to you," David admitted. "Partly because I'm not sure I can trust you, and partly because it gets a hold on you, doesn't it?" Michael nodded but said nothing. "You said you thought we could reverse what your friend Andrew did if you had this," Froman continued. "How do we do that?" Outside, the wind rattled the windows, and shadows from the dead star stretched long across the glass, trembling with every distant siren. Michael finally broke the silence, his voice low and measured, as if afraid the words themselves were a curse. "I can't do anything here," he said, his fingers tightening around the book. "I have to go back to the library. That's where it started, and that's the only place I think I have a chance to end it. There's power there. Whatever Andrew set up, whatever he started, it's still there." David recoiled, the dim light casting fractured shadows across his face, a stark reflection of the turmoil that churned within him. "Are you out of your mind? Going back there is suicide. I know you have a basic understanding of what's going on outside, but let me tell you, kid, you don't know the half of it. It's a fucking war zone out there." Michael's gaze was unblinking, the book held close to his chest as though it anchored him against the chill creeping into the room. "I know what I'm asking, but the ritual, the one Andrew started, the one that's warped this town, everything started at the library," Michael replied. "It's all bound to that place," he continued. "Even the little bit I glimpsed before made it very clear that the rites contained within this book have to be performed under very specific circumstances. If I'm to reverse what Andrew did, I need to take it back, and I need to do it there. I need to go back to that room in the basement. I think that's the only chance." "But the library's sealed up," David argued. Michael dropped his eyes for a moment, and then returned them to meet Froman's. "It'll open for me. Or it'll open for the book." Michael's eyes pleaded for understanding from the sheriff, but Froman merely stared at the book, as if it might sprout teeth or whisper forbidden secrets. The memory of the last expedition was etched in the lines around his eyes, the flickering flashlights, the shadows that had surrounded and pursued them, the screams of the 2 men he had lost. "You're sure?" David pressed, desperation scraping at the edges of his voice. "I'm sure," Michael said quietly. "If there's any hope, it lies in returning to the origin." The room was quiet for a few moments as Froman seemed to consider their limited options. With a gruff sigh, he nodded. "Okay, we'll go back," he said in a heavy voice. "Not we," Michael corrected. "Whatever entity wants me to have this book will kill anyone who comes with me. I don't know how I know that, I just know. It won't want anyone else to influence me. I have to do this alone." "Fuck that," David said promptly with a dismissive wave of his hand. "No way, Michael. Like I said, you're a civilian, and it's my job to protect you." "Nothing will bother me on my way to the library as long as I have the book," Michael said. "But you already know that, don't you?" Looking as if he was going to protest again, David instead remained silent and only nodded his head. "Besides," Michael pressed, "you have the other people of Haven to think of. There's got to be some way to help them." David clenched his fists, frustration flickering in his eyes. "I just don't know what to do for him, Michael. I try to think of something, anything, but every idea just feels useless." His voice was now raw, stripped of confidence. Michael studied him for a moment, then cradled the book against his chest, almost protectively. "I wish I had an answer for that, Sheriff," he said, "but maybe this'll help. Ever since I first looked at this book, it's been leaving impressions on me. Images, feelings, flashes that don't belong to me. While I've been here at the station, a couple of times I've seen Haven as if I'm standing outside of myself, and I've sensed those things stalking through the streets." He hesitated, searching for words that might make sense of the nightmare. "The creatures, they don't think like we do. There's no plan, no malice. They're driven by one thing alone: hunger. Just an endless, gnawing need to feed. I can feel it. It's like they're empty inside, all their thoughts eaten away. There's no empathy, no memory, no purpose except to consume. It's almost as if whatever existed in them before was erased, replaced by this terrible craving. They're like living voids. In a way, I think they're just pieces of whatever it is that Andrew tried to summon into our world. Like they're just bits of energy that slipped through a crack." David listened, silent and haunted, absorbing the weight of Michael's words, remembering the impression that he got when he was looking at the scorpion thing in the clearing, and how for a moment he could see what lay behind it. Michael continued, voice dropping nearly to a whisper. "While I don't think that fighting them head-on is the answer, and obviously reason won't reach them, but maybe you can distract them. Buy me and the people of Haven some time." A tense quiet settled over the room, broken only by the distant sound of Haven's uneasy night. Finally, Sheriff Froman seemed to make up his mind about something, and nodded to Michael. 5:10 a.m. Outside, the world remained suspended in an uneasy twilight, the promise of dawn seemingly still far away. The sun had not yet stirred on the horizon, and the entire town of Haven lay enveloped in the heavy, featureless dark, thick as velvet and cold as stone. Through desolate passageways, the creatures continued their relentless patrol. They drifted between alleyways and broken fences, moving with a hunger that seemed both aimless and inexhaustible. Their shapes, sometimes glimpsed in the periphery, sometimes revealed beneath the erratic gleam of alien stars, were indistinct, unmoored from any natural anatomy. Each was a silhouette of absence, a suggestion of teeth and limbs and eyeless faces that never quite resolved, vague forms that only hinted at the monstrosity beneath. They left behind a silence so complete it swallowed the echoes of their passage. Above it all, the sky was full of foreign stars and galaxies. In that darkness, the alien star, the one that was blasted and dead, yet impossibly present, hung lower than before, almost grazing the rooftops with its unwholesome pallor. It gave off no warmth, no light to rival even the weakest moon. Instead, it throbbed in the heavens like a bruise, vast and unmoving, emitting a gravity that pressed down on the town, on the windows and doors, on every breath the survivors dared take. Its color defied understanding, not black nor violet, nor any hue known to earthly skies, but something corrosive and foreign that gnawed at the edges of vision. The inhabitants of Haven, those who were still alive and aware, felt the dead star's presence like a thought at the back of their minds, an intrusion, a warning, a memory of a world that was never theirs. At times the star appeared closer, impossibly close, as if it might fall upon the town and erase it in a single silent moment. Within the houses and behind locked doors, every heartbeat was measured against the unnatural quiet outside. The creatures, hungry and insatiable, continued to drift, seeking nothing but to consume. Haven itself held its breath, waiting for the distant golden promise of the sun, a promise that the alien star threatened to swallow whole. 5:15 a.m. Inside the lobby, the mellow lanterns buzzed, casting pale shadows that danced across the weary faces of Sheriff Froman and his deputies. The room smelled faintly of stale coffee and sweat. The fatigue of all gathered was so strong it was nearly a physical presence among them. Every eye in the room was bloodshot, reflecting sleepless hours, stress, and the fear that this night had brought. Outside, the silence was heavy, a suffocating hush that pressed against the windows and crawled beneath the doors, broken only by the distant hollow scrape of something gliding along the gravel, a reminder of the threat that lingered just beyond their fragile sanctuary. Froman, boots planted firmly on the old tile, drew his deputies into a tight circle. His voice was steady, but beneath the surface a tremor betrayed the monumental weight of responsibility he carried. "Listen up," he began, scanning each face. Deputy Lee clutching a flashlight so tightly his knuckles were white. Deputy Collins perpetually glancing at the window, jaw clenched. And Deputy Samuels, fingers tracing the seams of a battered radio, searching for comfort in routine. "I know what we're up against out there looks like nightmares. But I don't believe these things are some kind of demon or invincible monster. They're animals. Meaner than wolves, sure, but animals all the same. And like any animal, they're drawn to what they can sense. They're drawn to noise and movement." He shifted his weight, boots creaking in the silence as an uneasy energy rippled through the group. The deputies exchanged nervous glances, hands subconsciously checking holsters and radios, each of them acutely aware of just how thin the line between safety and disaster had become. Deputy Lee, voice barely above a whisper, broke the silence. "So what's the plan, Sheriff?" Froman turned to the map taped haphazardly to the wall. It was riddled with notations, routes marked with blue ink, safe houses circled in green, and ominous red circles bleeding across neighborhoods where the creatures had already struck. "We're splitting up," he said, his words threading through the tense air. 4 convoys, 3 squad cars each. I'll take lead in the first convoy. Wyclef, Johnner, you're with me. Hernandez, you're the lead of convoy number 2. Christofferson, Daniels, go with her. Collins, you'll lead Graham and Moody. And Peterson, you're with Marin and Simmons. We'll head out in different directions within a 10-block radius surrounding the old quarter. The only place we know for certain is free of civilians. And light up the sirens. Also, the lead car in each convoy will use the PA to repeat the message that Haven is under lockdown, and all civilians are to remain inside their homes. We want everything out there to chase us, not the people hiding in their homes, not the ones we're trying to protect. We're going to use their mindless hunger against them and bring those bastards right down on top of us." He traced patrol routes with a battered finger, describing sharp turns and alleyways that offered fleeting escape. "You drive hard, you keep 'em on your tail. When the time comes, you lose 'em. Turn off the noise, double back, regroup, and start over. This is about making them hunt us, not the town. We draw them out, make 'em chase us, confuse 'em, and then start over. I don't think these fucking things are all that smart, just instinct and teeth. We buy Michael time. He's heading to the library to hopefully put an end to this." The deputies leaned in, absorbing every instruction, each scenario playing out in their minds. The sudden roar of the siren, the screech of tires, the frantic pounding of their own hearts. A gritty determination settled over the group. Some deputies swallowed hard, faces shadowed with doubt. Others braced themselves for the sprint through the waiting dark, hands tightening on the cold steel of their sidearms. The plan was reckless, a desperate gamble, but in the weight of the Dead Star's gaze, it felt like the only hope left. Froman let the gravity of the moment settle, meeting each deputy's eyes as if willing courage to take root within them. Turning to Michael, Sheriff Froman extended his hand. "Good luck, young man," David said. Accepting the handshake, Michael offered the sheriff a weary smile that looked far older than the face it was attached to. "And to you, Sheriff," Michael replied. And then, with the sense that he would never see this man again, he added, "You're a good man, Sheriff Froman." Without waiting for a reply, Michael disengaged and headed out through the double doors and into the restless night. Turning his attention back to his deputies, David addressed them again. "Get ready," he said, voice hoarse but resolute. "On my mark, we go. And remember, make as much noise as you can, be as elusive as you can, and maintain constant radio communication. But understand one thing. Eventually, we might have to dig in our heels, stand our ground, and fight." The silence stretched for a heartbeat longer, and then the deputies began to disperse, gathering radios and flashlights, loading as much ammunition into their cruisers as they could, steeling themselves for the chaos that was yet to come. Thank you for joining us here at Nightmares Incorporated, and we hope to see you again next week for the final part of Beyond the Veil. But until then, sweet dreams.